Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Before I begin, I want to commend and encourage and express my full confidence and my positive impression of our student advisor. She epitomized what we endeavor over the course of 13 years to educate, develop, and prepare. Education is not a monolithic journey. Young people have to be taught to think for themselves and to be able to express and articulate themselves in a very safe and secure space. So I want to say to you publicly, I look forward to your service on this board. Your perspective matters. Your voice matters. You matter. And I want to, excuse me, I cannot account for acts of disrespect that we don't suffer in schools being levied against you and colleagues here. But we must continue to press on and move forward and be intolerant to that as well. So I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your leadership in helping us navigate through this particular discourse. I want to thank the maker of the item, Sia Baez-Geller. It was mentioned previously that board members do bring items. And obviously this item was clearly anticipated to create a great degree of consternation, a great degree of anxiety, and sadly and regretfully a great degree of derision and division. But I want to thank the maker of the item for standing in her conviction, standing in her compassion, and standing in her courage. We all have to, at certain points in time, take that same journey, each and every one of us on different issues. Some issues we take and travel together, and some issues we have to take and travel alone. I want to thank the members of the public for endeavoring to spend in excess of 5, 6, 7 hours here at this meeting. And to one speaker previously that suggested that one board member is data-driven, I be that board member. And I have heard and I've received and I appreciate the over 2,000 and counting emails that I've received. And I've done my analysis that represents over 80+% of the people here today have taken great exception with some of the provisions that are being proffered. I never walk into any of these meetings with any degree of predisposition. Yes, we bring to bear our own personal experiences, our own personal beliefs, but at some point we have to square those beliefs, those predispositions with our obligation as elected school board members, and I take that very, very seriously. I bring to bear a perspective as a teacher, as a principal, as a district administrator, as a superintendent of schools, as a board member, but I also bring to bear a perspective of as a parent of a child in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So I've been very adamant and very consistent in my remarks that the notion of parental engagement and parental voice is not a new concept. It is something that I've embraced and fully supported over the course of 30 years. And I must bring to bear all of those experiences, all of those dispositions to a decision that I have to make. However, in cases I have to divorce my personal disposition with my obligation as a policy maker. Divorce my personal disposition with my obligation as a policy maker. And this is one of those particular points of views. In committee, for those of you that reviewed it, I did have initial concerns with recommend 2. because as a former teacher, I do have the belief that the classroom is still a sacred place. It is a place that should be afforded the academic freedoms that teachers expect, that I wanted to embrace, that I wanted to apply. So I did express that concern in committee, and I appreciate the revision that was made by my colleague. But again, I'm always very cautious about the district establishing certain parameters and guidelines on something that can be explored by teachers through their academic freedoms. They have the luxury of academic freedom, this case, that case, but in the end of the day, we have to follow state standards. With respect to a similar issue that many may make analogous to this, I want to just square that. We had an issue most recently relative to parental voice and an issue about textbooks and materials. For those who may not understand the distinction, the textbooks issue came back to the need to comply with the law. To comply with the law. But that textbook scenario addressed access, it involved a process, and it involved a law that was adopted in the previous legislature and signed by the governor in March of 2022. During our brief break, one stakeholder indicated that I should refer to the law for what others do. I can only read what the law says. It's called the Parental Bill of Rights. This is what it's called. I read it. And I think it has some implications for the actions that are before us. My personal predispositions, my love for all humanity, my commitment to inclusivity and access and representation, at some point I have to divorce that to my obligation to follow the law. To follow the law. And I remain somewhat concerned that the item as it's presented does not fully comport with the law, specifically the Parental Bill of Rights. However, I've always been one to try to find a level of collegiality, a level of collaboration, because I do believe that every board member here is sincere and well-intended and committed to what they truly believe is in the best interest of children. And I don't say from my district, I say from Florida City to County Line Road, because I do believe that we're elected by voting districts, but we have an obligation to represent all children, all communities, all schools, all zip codes. And I could not ignore some of the sentiments that were expressed that I had to research and vet, and some that I do believe had some level of merit. Being solution-based, looking at the recommend in number 1, this being something that will come from the board inherently, whether it's intended or not, will come from the board, the district, the school, and it will find its way into the classroom. That's not the intent. Clearly, that's not the intent. But because it lacks some of the clarity and it leaves that level of ambiguity for that to happen, I don't think any of us can afford to knowingly, and I said that on the previous item, knowingly not propose or not contemplate some actions that would at least give us some consideration. What I would have liked to see, and regretfully I didn't raise the issue in committee, was potentially some language that would say and recommend 1, pursuant to and in compliance with the Parent Bill of Rights. I know that the item cites policy 2240 and policy 2260, but those current policies as reflected on the books One speaks to controversial issues in student expression. The other speaks to non-discrimination and access. Neither references the Parental Bill of Rights. So those policies do not square with the current law that we have to be mindful of relative to that decision. So the comparison between last year and this year is real simple. The law. Very simple. From last year to this year, the law. Do my love and adoration for my sibling change? Absolutely not. Do my love and embrace and appreciation for individuals who can love who they choose to love and how they love, has that changed? Absolutely not. My obligation to protect and secure and provide for all children, no matter what their backgrounds and choices are, has that changed? Absolutely not. My obligation as an elected school board member is one that has to comply with the law that has now changed. And I have to be mindful of that. That is the oath that I've taken. That is the expectation that I must uphold. So with respect to recommend one, reference to the Parental Bill of Rights compliance and pursuant to, would have been better language for me to have some consideration, but right now the item before us is the item that is before us. So with respect to that, Madam Chair, I am not here to lecture. I'm not here to minister to anyone. And I'm not here to reprimand anyone either. I think we all are adults. We believe in democracy. This is America. We can express ourselves as we so fit. And at the end of the day, we have to make some determinations to vote our convictions, vote our consciences, but most importantly, vote our compliance with what is represented as a legal provision under the current law as it stands. I know this item was vetted by the board attorney. I think he answered one of the questions. I'm glad you asked the question that was raised, I think, by Dr. Dorothy Bendross-Mendengal, Madam Chair, because that is something that we rely on. But to the extent that that clarity is not solidified for me, and my interpretation is one that cannot fully square with this document, it does give me some degree of consternation and apprehension. And finally, I do understand and I do agree with my colleague, Board Member Byers-Geller, that it does not talk about explicitly curriculum. It does not talk about, and recommend one, instruction. But I do understand the level of ambiguity that talks about recognize and observe. And I wrote a few notes here that I said recognize and observe what, how, when, and by whom. And to the extent that that is not clarified and locked down pursuant to the provisions outlined in the Parental Bill of Rights, I think it does create some degree of legal uncertainty that we have to be mindful of. And my final comment, Madam Chair, I would be remiss if I did not say this is an important issue to the board. I had many of my colleagues mentioning the main thing being the main thing. Today, if you looked at the agenda, we had an outstanding presentation that we were looking forward to, and that is to celebrate the STEAM designation of schools. That represents the work of principals. That represents the work of this district. But above all, that represents the success and achievement of students. And that presentation was not made today. So I want to say parenthetically, congratulations. I trust that the superintendent will bring it back. But principals, teachers, district administrators, and most importantly, students, we appreciate those designations. We appreciate the great work that is being done in the district. And we know we are more than just a singular issue. But we obviously are confronted with this issue that we have to address at this particular moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.